There you go. Is it? Good evening, everyone. We are about to start. Not all of the candidates are here yet, but we expect them all to be here. I'd like to welcome our audience dedicated to learning more about the program. We have an impressive group of candidates tonight that have agreed to participate in this evening's forum sponsored by the Chevy Chase Community Association and the Shepherd Park Citizens Association. Our candidates for DC representatives to the United States House of Representatives include political leaders, business owners, lawyers, policy analysts, realtors, and other key professionals. Every candidate has pledged to fight for home rule and meaningful representation in Congress. Let's get specific tonight about how they will do this. We hope to have time to learn about the candidates and their priorities. Let's give a hand for their commitment and passion. My name is Robert Gordon. I'm the past president of the Chevy Chase Community Association and a former ANC chair, and also a big pickleball enthusiast. I'd like to introduce my colleague from the Shepherd Park Citizens Association, Eddie Cordone.
I'd like to say hello to everybody, first of all, and thank you for coming. This is an important forum to have for everybody in the community. My name is Eddie Cordone. I live in Shepherd Park and was a member of the Shepherd Park Citizen Association. And Robert and I are the co-moderators for this evening's forum. We have been asked to read to everybody that's in attendance here the procedures and conduct to be followed at this forum. Specifically, no posters or signs are permitted inside the school, and no solicitation of any kind by any group will be permitted. Only candidates may present their opinion at the forum. No proxies will be permitted in the forum. Mutual respect and decorum are expected. No name calling, shouting, interruptions, or disturbances will be permitted. Any individuals causing disruption will be asked to leave the school building. Only one person may speak at a time. If you decide to rebut or refute a statement from another candidate during your time and decide to use your time in that way, you will lose your opportunity to present your opinion and position on the subject. When the timekeeper who is sitting in front of me, I believe Mr. Speck, holds up the sign for 15 seconds, wrap up your discussion and stop talking when the stop sign is shown. If you continue to talk, the amount of time you use will be subtracted from the time you have to answer the next question. The audience will hold all applause until all candidates have had a turn to answer the question. No booing, cheering, or loud outbursts will be permitted. You may be asked to leave the forum if your behavior does not comply with these procedures. Prior to the beginning of the forum, please silence all electronics, including cell phones, watches, laptops, etc. Electronic devices on vibration can interfere with the Zoom at the podium. And also to let anybody know who is attending this forum via the webinar, there will be no chat function available. There will be closed caption and you'll only be allowed to observe only. And thank you very much. I believe now the forum will begin with an introduction, self-introduction of the candidates one by one. We can start with Mr. Trent Holbrook, if you'd like to come up and give an introduction. Which I believe the introductions are limited to about 2 minutes apiece. And Mr. Speck will keep the time.
Well, thank you so much for hosting this important forum, and thank you to everybody for being here tonight. I'm Trent Holbrook, and for the past 8 years, I was on the front lines of every federal fight for DC's future. I fought shoulder to shoulder with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, including while serving as her senior legislative counsel. For example, when I started working with Congresswoman Norton, the DC statehood bill had been voted on only once in US history in 1993, and it failed 2-1. I worked to get over 100 national organizations to endorse the bill, making DC statehood the national issue that it is and that it deserves to be. I worked with those organizations, with DC residents and others, and we took the bill from losing 2-1 in 1993 to passing in the US House of Representatives for the first time in American history. And we did it not once, but twice. The second time, every single House Democrat voted yes for DC statehood. I led the fights in Congress against every anti-home rule attack on DC. I also served in the executive branch of government, serving in legislative affairs at AmeriCorps, where I worked to protect the agency when Republicans aimed to zero it out. We didn't let them do that. I know how important federal service is. Working with Congresswoman Norton, I fought the illegal firings of our federal employees, fought to rehire those who were illegally fired, and I fought for pay raises for every federal employee. I'm the only person in this race who is ready to deliver for DC on day one. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Greg Jaxco. You're gonna have to help me out on that. Around this way, if you would.
$5, I think.
I lost that.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Yatsko. I, like the others here, I'm running in the DC congressional race. I have spent my career working to take science and use it in the public policy arena. I came to Washington about 27 years ago on a science fellowship to work on Capitol Hill. At the time, I worked for a Massachusetts Congressman, Ed Markey, who's now a senator, and worked on a number of important policy issues dealing with issues important to Massachusetts, important in the national context. From there, I spent time with Senator Harry Reid learning about leadership, learning about how to fight for people, whether that was in the state of Nevada or across the country on issues of significant national importance. I helped him ensure that we would respond appropriately to the terrorist attacks on 9/11 back, something that many people don't really remember these days, but was a significant milestone in our country's history. From there, I moved over to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, where I was the youngest commissioner ever to serve on that agency. And in 2009, President Obama appointed me to lead that agency. It was a 4,000-person agency with a budget of over $1 billion. So I saw firsthand the importance of federal workers. I defended those workers. I defended our budget in front of Congress. So I've been really unique in the fact that I have sat on the dais testifying to Congress, and I've sat behind the dais supporting and staffing members of Congress. So I've seen the Hill from many ways. I've been on the House side, I've been on the Senate side, and as many people joke, in the House, if you're a Democrat, your enemy is the Republicans, your opponent are the Republicans, but your enemy is the Senate. And in the Senate, there's a similar sense of how there's really a need to make sure that things get done in both houses of Congress in order to be effective. So I have seen many different issues. In the 27 years I've been here, we've talked about statehood. The approach that I will take to statehood is to reset the narrative and start talking about how we can restore rights to DC, because statehood will take time. So with that, I will close with my most important point, which is I will fight to ensure that no DC residents have to pay federal income taxes until we have achieved statehood. Thank you.
Our next candidate in introduction, Ms. Brooke Pinto.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here today, those who are in person and joining us online. And thank you so much to the Chevy Chase Citizens Association for hosting tonight's forum and for keeping our community here so engaged. It's been a lot of the engagement from the neighbors here that have pushed us on the DC Council to move balls along, whether that's around affordable housing, around safety, around further investments in our schools and for our kids. And so thank you for all that you do. I am Brooke Pinto. I am the Ward 2 council member, and I serve as the chair of the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. And my entire career and life really has all been about serving district residents and helping people solve their problems. It's what I did when I worked at the landlord-tenant court, helping mediate conflicts between landlords and tenants. It's what I did at the DC Attorney General's office, fighting to protect workers' rights and tenants' rights. And it's what I've done on the council for the last 6 years, shepherding transformational public safety legislation, transformational investments for literacy training for our students, a new model to incentivize conversions of downtown office buildings that DC is now leading the nation in. And I am so excited to hopefully, with your support, become DC's next congressional delegate so I can continue making real progress on behalf of our city to ensure that we can leverage billions of dollars from the federal government that we deserve here in the city, that we can transfer national park land to the city so we can use it for our families, and that we can have sustainable safety investments that are not Congress undermining our safety and autonomy, that they are aiding it. And so I hope to have your support in this election. I want to also thank all of my fellow candidates for being here tonight and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is Sandy Stevens. No, she's not here. Our next candidate is Kelly Michael Williams.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. And those of you who are joining us online, thank you very much. Again, my name is Kelly Michael Williams. I see this election in a different way. I see this election with a thread of humanity running through it. Because how we treat our residents, how we are going to continue to help our students and our children in the city, our seniors, is going to be key in this, whoever wins this election moving forward. I'm someone who has seen this system fail its citizens. I was homeless in this city when my son was 3 years old. And when I went to get services, I was told point blank, we don't service men. And so I had to deal with that and find out why we don't deal and why don't we don't service men. I was a single father, I had a child, and I couldn't get any services. So I had to sleep in the back of my car and figure out what to do with my 3-year-old son. I was able to do that and be able to keep that going because that little boy that was 3 years old at that time is now 23. He graduated from NYU in 4 years, and he's getting his master's degree in London, England in this May. That leadership and that conviction and that service, what's allowed me to do what I have to do recently. I'm the only one in this race who's worked at every level of government. I've been in the White House. I was an administrator for a federal agency. I've worked on DC Council, the state legislature, and I'm ANC commissioner for the last 4 years, chairman. I'm also a small business owner. I understand exactly what we need to do and how we need to do it. Housing in this city is unaffordable. Healthcare, housing, and home rule is what I'm standing on and what I'm fighting for. We need to make sure that that pillar is what we use and that pillar is what we move forward on. I'm asking you for your support because if you want someone who's going to fight for you with lived experience, I'm the one that's in this race that has that experience to do that. And I ask you for your vote, and I look forward to the discussion because there's going to be much more that we have to discuss after this. Thank you very much.
Our final candidate for introductions is Ms. Kinney Zelensi.
Whoa, I'm pretty short for this arrangement.
I'm gonna help you with this.
Okay. Can you see me? Okay, good evening. All right, I'll do it this way, but good evening. I'm Kinney Zalesny. I'm running for Congress because Trump is crushing this city on purpose, and DC needs an experienced national fighter who knows how to push back. I am the only one in this race with a proven track record of winning on the national stage. So let me tell you briefly about myself. I have lived in this city for 30 years. I raised 4 kids here. I worked in the Clinton White House. I was counsel to the Attorney General at the Justice Department. I ran a nonprofit based in Adams Morgan that helped thousands of DC kids become the first in their families to go to college. I ran the strategy team at Microsoft. And in this last presidential cycle, I was a deputy national finance chair at the DNC and co-chair of Women for Kamala Harris. In each of these roles, I brought new resources and lasting results into this city. So at the Justice Department, I helped beat back Republican efforts to kill after-school programs, which once they were enacted, brought crime down in this city farther and faster than it had ever fallen. And at the White House, I fought to make sure that every school and library in this city, especially in Wards 7 and 8, were wired for the internet. And at Peer Forward, the college access nonprofit, we helped drive the movement that boosted college enrollment rate in this city from under 40% to over 60%. And Barack Obama noticed, and he rewarded our impact with a big portion of his Nobel Peace Prize money. And Michelle Obama was on our local board in Chicago. So I have been fighting for 30 years and winning new resources and lasting results in this city. The delegate job is an unusual job, and we'll talk about it more tonight. I look forward to the conversation. But I'm the only one in the race with the actual proper preparation for the role. Thank you.
Thank you. As promised, a very distinguished group of candidates. Thank you so much. We are going to now start with some of our questions. The first question will be answered by all of the candidates. The first question is, what congressional committee assignment would be most important for you if you were elected, and why? And I'd like Kelly Michael Williams to take the first question.
Do we stay here?
No, come up, please. Otherwise, people can't see you on the webinar. Around this way. I don't want anybody to get hurt.
So the probably the most primary committee would be appropriations, but I'm also looking at finance because finance is going to be the committee that's dealing with housing, and housing is very important because, as I said earlier, housing is unaffordable. Since 2016, rents have gone from $1,600 to over $3,000 a month. So when you look at those who have been in charge, our council members and our mayor, and even our delegate, and they tell you they've been building affordable housing, you have to ask yourself, who has it been affordable for? Because certainly going from 1,600 to over 3,000 in 10 years, it clearly isn't affordable. And when they talk about they're going to build more affordability, they're using the metrics that are based on 5 counties in Maryland and 5 counties in Virginia. That's what our AMI is based on. So you have to ask yourself, why haven't they done something about that? Why haven't they gone to HUD and put something in that's new? Why haven't they gone and put in a pilot program? Why haven't they gone to the delegate and asked her to go to HUD? Why hasn't our mayor and our city council members who have been claiming they've been putting together affordable housing done something about that AMI? The AMI is not even based on the 8 wards of DC. That's a problem. That's something I'll change. So when we talk about those committees, appropriation is very key, but finance is even more important because that's where our housing money is going to come from. I'm going to make sure I go to HUD, change that, and we'll make affordability real, not presumed, but real. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Brooke Pinto. You want me to repeat the question? Which?
Thank you. So I have 4 priority committees that I'd like to serve on. The first is government oversight, which is the committee that houses oversight for the District of Columbia affairs. When they are making laws that affect us, we need to have DC's voice as a part of that committee. Second is Judiciary Committee. It's where I have a lot of local experience, having had been the chair of the Council's Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. A lot of the congressional attacks that have been coming towards our city over the last year and a half have been public safety related. And so we don't have Congress instituting laws that send our 14-year-old children to adult prisons across the country. We need to have somebody from DC who understands these issues on the Judiciary Committee. Third, I'd like to serve on the Financial Services Committee so that we can do creative things like Charlene Drew Jarvis did years ago in working with Congress to have them treat us like a state for the purposes of banking. We can do that again with other financial services as we grow and expand our economy and ensure that we are innovating the industries that are here. And fourth is appropriations to make sure that we can get billions of dollars from the federal government that are going to be good for district residents and that are going to be good for a strong nation's capital. So those are the 4 committees that I plan to serve on our behalf.
Thank you. Next up is Kelly Michael Williams. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong place. No. Sorry. Greg Yasko. Yasko.
Yeah, that's
better?
Yes.
All right.
So the question is, what committees would I like to serve on? Well, certainly, number one, I think we have to be honest that the delegate does not have a lot of choice and a lot of opportunity in committee assignments and committee selections. It's a non-full voting member of the House. And so we will have some limitations. Oversight is an obvious committee that we want to serve on, of course, appropriations, but every new member, in particular, new members who are in swing districts, will want the opportunity to be on committees where they can have an influence and will likely get those assignments. Beyond those 2 committees, the other committee I think is extremely important is natural resources. Brooke mentioned early in her remarks about public lands in DC. I was actually out today visiting a lot of those public lands, and some of them are triangles no bigger than the table that people are sitting at. And we continue to maintain those public lands as national parks rather than being turned back to the District of Columbia. So I think that's an important committee that also gives us some kinship with those other territories that are treated similarly to the district as Americans. They are not full voting representation in the United States Congress. So I think it gives us a good opportunity to find allies and to work ultimately to achieve statehood. So thank you.
Same question, which committee? Kinney Zalesny. Sorry.
Thank you. First choice Appropriations Committee. No DC delegate has ever sat on that committee. It would be incredibly powerful if we could get there. Also very important is the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee because it oversees the affairs of DC, and we need to be sure that our interests are defended and that we can fight for ourselves. Now, but let me say the most important thing about committee assignments. It is very hard for any junior House member to get any valuable committee assignment. The only exception is when you already know House leadership and when you have, and I know this sounds crude, but when you have helped raise money for the party. I have been, because I was a deputy national finance chair, I have helped raise money for the party for years. I know many members of the House leadership, and I have relationships with them already. Those relationships will get me on better committees than any of the other candidates will be able to accomplish, and that will serve DC's interests far better.
And the last for this question is Trent Holbrook.
Thank you. Like everybody else said, I would also seek to serve on the House Oversight Committee. As I mentioned, I worked for Congressman Norton for the past 8 years, and I was her lead staffer on that committee. So I know the staff, I know the work of the committee at an expert level. I know the members and I know the staff very well, which is incredibly important when you're trying to move legislation through. All major issues impacting DC go through that committee. And so it's critical that somebody be on that committee. Also, the committee handles federal employee issues as well. And so that's critical for this position. We have so many federal employees in the District of Columbia. I would also consider serving on the House Rules Committee. They're the ones that help determine floor debate for bills that come to the floor. And they also determine what amendments are made in order to bills, which can be critically important for DC because we can offer amendments to help DC. And most importantly, there's so many amendments that have been offered in this Congress and the last Congress to overturn DC laws at the Rules Committee. So having a strong voice there, I think would be absolutely critical. Thank you.
Okay, our second question for the candidates is the following. President Trump has proposed a $10 billion fund for beautification of the District of Columbia. Do you support the plan for such a fund? And if so, how should the fund be used? And who should make the decisions about the use of any such funds? The first candidate to answer that question would be Kenny Zelensky.
So I love this idea of $10 billion new dollars for DC. And nobody's really been talking about it because we're so conditioned to hate everything Trump does for us that we think it must be some kind of, poison pill. And it is. But let me say, like $10 billion for DC, let's think about that for a moment. Now, what he wants to do with it, I'm sure, is catastrophic. He wants to build, the Arc de Trump, and he wants to make up problems and solve them. And so he should not be deciding that on his own. Of course, the leadership of DC, the delegate, the mayor, the DC council should have a say in how $10 billion new dollars could be spent in the city. But I can tell you what I would do with $10 billion in this city. I would spend it on housing. We are 250,000 units short of affordable housing in this city. We must provide more housing. I'd spend it there. I would restore the ability to pay for healthcare in this city because Trump's Medicaid cuts is making it impossible for people to live here, starting and between housing and healthcare. That's like most of your monthly budget. So that's where, so I would welcome that money, but we've got to have a say in how it's spent. And I have much better ideas for it than he does.
Our second candidate to answer that question would be Trent Holbrook.
So I would have to say that I've been skeptical of the $10 billion since the president announced it. Of course, if it went toward actually doing beautification of DC, if it went toward MPS and cleaning parks and things like that, of course, we'd welcome that. If DC residents had a say in how that was going to be used, of course. However, if it's going to be used to increase whatever type of policing, if it's going to be used to force DC to work more on the federal government and immigration issues or things like that, then of course I would strongly oppose it. So this is something I guess I would say that I'm skeptically optimistic about, but I think we need to have strong oversight both in Congress and in DC on how the money is spent. Thank you.
The third candidate to answer that question would be Kelly Michael Williams.
Like my colleagues, I'll be very skeptical, but at the same time, I never look a gift horse in the mouth. So if he's going to give us 10 billion, we'll take it as long as he gives it to us when we have control of the House and the Senate. So that way we can control it. Now, if he's going to do it while the Republicans are still in charge, then of course we'll have some problems to deal with. But if we get it, first thing I deal with is housing. Second thing I'll deal with is seniors, veterans, healthcare. Make sure we put back the 1.1 billion that was taken from us and we can get our healthcare. Also some youth programs so our youth have something to do and we don't have the issue with them hanging out in Navy Yard and other places. And then also making sure that we deal with being able to beautify and clean up some areas that we need to clean up, but making sure that that affordability in terms of housing that we talked about is put to use and that we're able to actually build real affordability and real affordable housing and have programs, grocery stores in areas that need them and other areas and other things that are allowing us to actually improve the quality of life of district residents. The quality of life of district residents is most important and key. I said to you earlier, humanity, that thread needs to run through this campaign and this election. If we don't take care of our residents, our seniors aging in place, like I took care of my mother for 13 years, she had Alzheimer's and dementia. If we don't do that, we've failed and we are failing miserably. So those are the things that we need to do, and that's what we need to put that money for.
The final candidate to answer this question, Ms. Brooke Pinto.
Well, you know the good old expression, you'd like to be in the room where it happens. I have been in the room in many of these negotiations trying to secure additional dollars for the district from this administration. We did it a couple of months ago when we saw National Guards troops be sent here from states across America, many of them armed. And we went to the National Guard and said, if you're going to be here, there are things that we would like your help with. We don't want you by schools with guns. We would like your help in cleaning up the snow and getting rid of the piles of ice. And we would like $100 million to help with the revitalization of some of our parks and turning on our fountains that have been broken, all of which were delivered. This money, the $10 billion that the president announced, while he used pretty offensive language in it, it is going to be capital dollars for the beautification of Washington. So I love a lot of these ideas that have been shared about all the programmatic operational things we'd like to see. This bucket of money is not necessarily going to be where that comes from. This is going to be how we as a community can be creative in defining what beautification means. So things like cleaning up our parks, cleaning up graffiti, planting flowers, making sure that we have clean public spaces. There are absolutely avenues we should continue exploring to secure additional operational dollars for important human costs. But I have called for a community working group to identify priority areas so that in those meetings, we can ensure that the district's voice is present.
Oh, I have one answer this.
Oh, please, come on.
So I look at this 10 billion, like I look at a lot of the things that President Trump does. So all of these things are typically happening outside the normal laws and normal way that we assign dollars. We're having a discussion here about what we think Trump is going to do with $10 billion. That's not the way our government works. We have appropriations. The president then and the agencies that are appropriated dollars have an obligation to spend those funds the way that Congress directs them to. We have a $1.5 billion backlog in the National Park Service for parks in the District of Columbia. So what we should do first, of course, with that $10 billion is actually do the statutory things for which we have an obligation. This is a typical Trump tactic, which is to say, I'm going to spend $10 billion. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know what the authorization is for. And we as a district have an obligation to push back and say, no, this isn't the way we do things in this country. We don't have an emperor who can just write checks and build arches so that he can get his name on buildings like the Kennedy Center. Those kinds of things are illegal. And we need to push back, and we need to push back when he does it, even in a way that's enticing and that looks promising for the district, because we have a process and we have to follow the law because it matters in everything that we do, not just in the things like having ice in our streets, but in having the right way that we get appropriated dollars here in the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for that, those answers. The next question for me is the crux of the matter. What would you do as the district's congressional representative to assert the district's rights to self-rule in light of the Trump administration's and the congressional Republicans' efforts to usurp those rights? And first up is Trent Holbrook.
Thank you so much for the question. This has been, just adjust this. This has been a critical part of the job that I've done for the past 8 years working for Congresswoman Norton. I led on the Hill every single anti-home rule fight that we've had for the past 8 years. And we've seen a historic number of these attacks on DC. DC is under greater attack than it's been probably since enactment of the Home Rule Act in 1973. And there's a reason that these attacks are coming. And the reason is because on the flip side, the huge success that we've had on DC statehood, we've gotten a record number of co-sponsors on the DC statehood bill, and we've gotten it through the House of Representatives twice. And so I have fought side by side with Congressman Norton fighting every single one of these anti-home rule attacks. I opposed the attempted federalization of MPD, which was illegal. I opposed sending the National Guard into our streets to enforce our local laws, which was illegal. But not only do we oppose those, but we use every single anti-home rule attack that we've had to also try to expand home rule authority for DC. So on the flip side, again, for example, we passed through the House for the first time in history the District of Columbia National Guard Home Rule Act, which would give control over the DC Guard to the mayor as opposed to the president where it belongs. So it's critically important to know how to use every single event that's happened, every attack, to, instead of being attacked, use it to expand our own authority and continue to make the case for DC statehood. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, this is on home rule. Next up is Kenny Zelesny, sorry.
Okay, I have a slightly unorthodox answer to this question. I think it's a three-part plan that we've got to do here in DC in order to defend home rule and advance statehood. First, we have more work to do than we think inside the district. I know there is a very animated, energized movement for statehood, but I don't think it's big enough. I think that there are plenty of people who have power in this city who don't think they need a state, and people who don't have any power who think statehood is not going to help them. So I think we have more work to do to rally our own people to this cause. When anyone around the country speaks to someone in DC, they should hear how unfair it is that we're not a state. And I don't think they hear that from most citizens in the district. So I think we have work to do on that front. Second, we've got to rally allies and partners in our Democratic Party around the country. So when I was a deputy national finance chair, I know what the priorities of the Democratic Party are. DC, home rule, and statehood are on the list, but they're not at the top of the list. And we have work to do to recruit and enlist our own national party, our own allies around the country. And only when we've done those two things can we pick off the Republicans and find some kind of grand bargain. We're going to have to work across the aisle to get to protect home rule and advance statehood. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Brooke Pinto.
Well, the fact that Washington, D.C. is not a state is the greatest civil rights issue and injustice of our time. And like every major step of progress that we have taken in our nation's history, it has always followed a period of darkness and great strife and division. And so I am very optimistic that as we build our coalition nationwide, there is more enthusiasm for our cause. 90% of district residents do support statehood. And so when I go around the country, whether it was with my work working at the Attorney General's office, whether it was my work supporting other candidates running for office across the country, or now running for this seat myself, it is the first topic that I raise in any group to expose people to the injustice of our lack of statehood and what it really means for us, what it means for our autonomy, for our insecurity around our budget, for our own locally raised dollars, what it means for our rights. And I have found that the American interest in this issue has been increasing significantly. I was just meeting with the young Democrats across America. They have chapters in every state. It is now going to be the #1 policy priority for those chapters. We need to do the same thing with all of our religious groups, with the Democratic Party itself, and with all of our civic associations to ensure that we have American support. And in the meantime, we will continue doing everything we can to preserve home rule. And that means in this tenuous situation, working with everyone to secure our rights.
I'd like to call up to the microphone, Greg.
Well, thank you. I think, of course, I think as Robert said, this is the most important question. All these other issues we talk about really come down to how we deal with statehood, because we talked about this $10 billion, not having full voting representation in the House and the Senate is extremely important, and we could figure out what would really be going on with the $10 billion. But this issue of statehood has been here for a long time. It's been an issue since I came to Washington 27 years ago, and we have made some progress, but we haven't gotten statehood yet. So I think it's time that we reset the debate and reset the narrative. And the way that I propose doing that is to pass and introduce and then pass legislation that exempts DC businesses and any DC taxpayer from paying federal income taxes in the District of Columbia as long as we are not a state. Right now, per capita, DC taxpayers pay anywhere from 20 to estimates about $20,000 to $50,000 in their taxes that actually goes to the rest of the country. So not only are we paying money that we have no authority in Congress to fully appropriate and fully work on, but most of that money is going to the rest of the country anyway. So we need to say no, and we need to stop paying federal income taxes so that people in Wyoming begin to understand why it is that we're different. And the reason that we're different is because we're not a state. And that begins to reset this discussion so we can work on a lot of the great ideas that I've heard here from my fellow candidates about how we actually do that from a nuts and bolts perspective. Thank you.
Next up is Kelly Michael Williams.
I like all of my colleagues' responses. I would also say that it is a civil rights issue, deeply civil rights issue. I said to you, healthcare, housing, and home rule was my platform. Those were the three things that I was fighting for. Home rule was the anchor of that. And what I believe is that we need to change and strengthen and amend the Home Rule Act 740. I believe that in 2018, we saw that we had federal agencies on our street. And at that time in 2021, when we had the House, the Senate, and the White House, we should have done something about that at that point in time. We should have been forward thinking, recognizing and understanding that because the mayor did not have power of the National Guard, because the president was putting troops or federal agencies with no insignia on our streets, we should have done something about it then. We didn't do that. So we had a missed opportunity that we cannot miss again. When we have missed opportunities, it costs us our lives, our autonomy, and our civility. I don't think we should do that again. I think we need to do that and make sure it happens. We need to pass that. And we go across the country, 54% of Americans believe that we should have statehood. We should have home rule. We should have that autonomy over our budget, over our policies. I have a bill, I have legislation that I will introduce. It's called the Home Rule Protection Act, Anti-Interference Act, which will stop policy writers for our budget and for our policy when we pass bills. Those are the things that I would do.
Thank you. And the last on this question is Kenny Zalesny. Did you go? Oh, sorry. Bookkeeping error.
The fourth question for the candidates this evening is the following. What is the most important legislative initiative that you will support as the district's congressional representative, and what would you do to get that legislative initiative enacted? The first candidate to address that would be Greg Yatsko.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue from what I just talked about. I think unless you weren't listening earlier, I think one of the most important issues we could do is introduce legislation to exempt DC businesses, DC taxpayers from paying federal income taxes. I think it is a really unique way to begin to reset the discussion and the narrative around statehood and around home rule and how the district is different from so many other parts of the United States. I think it's a way for, as I said, people across the country to begin to understand this difference in a way that they can perhaps they can feel differently than they do with these general concepts about sovereignty, about representation in Congress, issues which really don't resonate with most people because that's a normal part of their life. And despite what what I think there may be support for statehood across the country. My personal experience is whenever I go places, people don't really know what the district is. They don't know if it's a state. They don't know quite how to talk about it or describe it. So we have a lot of educating to do because ultimately statehood is about getting the rest of the country to recognize this civil rights injustice that so many of my fellow candidates have talked about. So I think a good way to do that is to introduce this legislation. And I think it's something that could potentially have broad support, not just with Democrats, but with Republicans as well. Certainly with Libertarian Republicans who'd like to see the federal income tax go away completely. Why not use the district as a pilot for something like that? And I think that would get people thinking about DC differently. Thank you.
The next candidate to address this question, Kelly Michael Williams.
It would be the bill I just talked about. Home Rule Protection Anti-Interference Act. That legislation is based on a formula model of Puerto Rico, which is similar to what Greg is talking about, ending the ability of us paying federal taxes. But ultimately, the principle of the bill is to make sure that we have our autonomy over our budget and over our legislation that the city council passes. So it will put in and it will block riders that the Republicans usually attach to our legislation to take away our budget, our 1.1 billion, or to modify or veto our legislation that we passed here for the people that we've elected and we put in charge. We're having individuals that do not live here, weren't elected here, controlling us right now. And we need to be able to stop that. So the statehood or home rule bill will be the first piece of that. And then ultimately, ideally, we'll be able to have our own legislature and be able to put things in place. I have a full breakdown of exactly how we would do that and be able to have the autonomy for our budget and our legislation and be able to give the mayor the power of the National Guard, give our council the power over the legislation, and then give our delegate the ability to vote on the floor and do other things, not just in the committee of the whole, but also in regular order of the Congress and move forward that way.
The next candidate, Ms. Brooke Pinto.
Well, there is so much I want to do. First things first, I want to secure us a vote in the committee of the whole, which is the committee that meets right before the House votes on the House floor. I've already been meeting with members of Congress and in leadership in both parties about a pathway forward that I think will be there. And that will give us some additional autonomy. I want to secure hundreds of millions of dollars for the cleaning up of the Anacostia and Potomac River, so that they can be fully swimmable and fishable, and to make sure that we have swimming areas that are safe for our residents and our families. I want to transfer tens of thousands of square feet of GSA-owned buildings to both the district control, but also to the private sector, and create a master development plan that will connect neighborhoods like downtown all the way to the wharf to bring tens of thousands of new homes, recreation, retail, and new neighborhoods. I want to make sure that we secure our sustainable healthcare stream so that we don't have to debate Congress every year around our Medicaid allocation. I want to do more with gun control, absolutely with the country, but certainly first with the region, because we have to stem the flow of illegal guns coming into DC from Maryland and Virginia because they have different gun laws. And these are areas where regional compacts become very, very important for the congressional delegate from DC to be leading on. So those are some of my first year priorities.
And lastly, Mr. Trent Holbrook.
Thank you for the question. My top legislative priority, of course, would be DC statehood. As I've mentioned, I've been the lead staffer working on statehood for the past 8 years, and we almost always introduced it the very first day the bills could be introduced in Congress, and we virtually always did it with a record number of co-sponsors. And it's important to get out there early and do it the first day if you can, to get members on record supporting it and to make sure it stays at the top of the national conversation. I would also pursue the dual track that Congresswoman Norton has been pursuing of on one side, you support statehood, and on the other side, you also work to expand home rule authority for DC. So things like giving the mayor control over the DC National Guard and making sure that the president doesn't federalize Metropolitan Police Department. And thirdly, I would also focus heavily on affordability, one of my top priorities. And another thing that I would have to say about this is we've heard about the committee of the whole several times. We hear this in just about every debate. That's critically important that the delegate has the committee of the whole vote, because traditionally in history, the delegate has not gotten the committee of the whole vote whenever Republicans were in the majority. But this is the very first Congress right now where the delegate does have that authority. So if we have a candidate who comes in, somebody that we elect comes in and says, I want to fight to bring back the committee of the whole vote, you're fighting for something that Republicans have already conceded on. Congressman Norton got this, the committee of the whole vote back in the 90s. Republicans sued, lost in the district court, lost in the Court of Appeals. And so it was always the case that Democrats gave them the vote. But for the first time in American history, Republicans have already given us this. So we don't need to have somebody come in trying to fight for something that Republicans have already conceded on. And that's why it's important to elect somebody who has this legislative experience and actually knows how to use the legislative process to deliver for DC. Thank you.
And Ms. Kinney-Slentz.
Okay, because the DC delegate has no vote, I think we need to think about the role more expansively than just legislative priorities. So I see the role as having two parts, and conveniently, those two parts rhyme. It's autonomy and economy. So autonomy is a lot of what we've been talking about already. We need to fight for DC's budget autonomy, legislative autonomy, vote on the House floor, control of the National Guard, maybe a delegate in the Senate, and then ultimately statehood. That's one half of this delegate job. But to my mind, the other half is economy. And we need to rethink our economy in DC and reinvent it in a way that's going to be less dependent on the federal government. We learned the hard way that we can't rely on the federal government as the engine of our economic growth. We are projected to lose 40,000 jobs because of the reckless and indiscriminate DOGE cuts. So I think a big part of the delegate's job is to work closely with the mayor and DC council to think about how we're going to attract business here and how we're going to grow our own innovation scene. I am the only one in the race who's worked in the private sector, let alone I was the strategy lead in a Fortune 1 company. I know how to bring business here, large and small, and that's critical for the next stage of DC growth.
Thank you for your answers. The fifth question, as a district's congressional representative, what working relationship will you initiate with the mayor and the council? And what experience do you have that would help you to work effectively with district officials? Trent Holbrook to start.
Thank you for the question. So as I've said multiple times, I think everybody now knows I worked for Congressman Norton for the past 8 years. And so almost every day we had conversations with the mayor and with the council, usually the council chairman, and we had good relationships with both. The one thing I will say is it can be occasionally frustrating when it doesn't seem like there's a unified voice coming out of DC. It's harder to make the attacks against the home rule attacks to defend our DC home rule whenever not everybody in DC is on the same page. But I've worked consistently over the past 8 years to try to make sure that all of DC was lined up to defend our home rule, to advance the causes that we need, like appropriations and money, and to also ultimately advance DC statehood as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kenny Zalesny.
There are only 16 citywide elected positions in the District of Columbia. There are 13 DC council members and a delegate and a mayor and an attorney general. That's it. We don't have senators. We don't have a governor. We don't have 2 houses of our legislature. We don't have city versus state. We just have these 16 people, and we better get it right on June 16th. We are under attack by our own president. We have this limited window to choose the right people across the board to represent DC, to defend our rights and advance our interests. The delegate needs to work very closely with the mayor, the DC council, and the attorney general. We don't all have to speak in unison, but we have to work in a coordinated fashion. I think one of the biggest problems the mayor had this past term is she didn't have a partner on the Hill, because Eleanor Holmes Norton has not been the fighter recently that she used to be. The 16 of us have got to organize and coordinate very closely. Sometimes we have to be good cop and bad cop. The mayor didn't have that option. She had to do both at the same time. We have to coordinate very closely and strategically to defend our rights and advance our interests. And we have no excuse for not being able to do that. 16 people can make that happen. And you, as the voters, should demand that of us and hold us accountable for it.
Next up is Kelly Michael Williams.
As I said in my opening, I'm the only one in this race that's worked at every level of government. But more importantly, as ANC chairman for the last 4 years, I've had to work with all the council members, staff, and the mayor's staff in some form or fashion for everything that we're doing in our area, in our community, in our SMDs, in the areas that we're working in. Sorry about that, guys. I'll make sure I remember that next time. That relationship and that experience allows me to be able to negotiate and work with the staff members, the council members. As constituent service director for Vincent Orange when I was on the council, being able to go around the city and working also with the ANC commissioners, and then becoming an ANC commissioner is even making it even stronger relationship bond between my ability to be able to negotiate, work with. I disagree with my colleague. We do have to have a unified voice. The problem we're having right now is that we don't have a unified voice. What's going on in Congress? Congress wants to help and support us. And if our mayor and our council is not on the same page, they can't vote in our favor and they can't vote with us. So as a delegate, I'm going to make sure I have the members of the House with me, but I also need the council and the mayor with me as well. Oh, I got 15 more seconds. That's okay.
The next speaker is Brooke Pinto.
Well, let me first address what was raised about the committee of the whole. With all due respect to our incredible warrior on the Hill, that idea has come to me from our Democratic allies who said, unfortunately, that vote has not been utilized even after they supported DC to secure it. And so that's why it has not been consistent, even though in this rules it has been fought for. In terms of working together as a city. Yes, we absolutely need to work with the council and with the mayor, certainly. And as a member of the DC Council, I know how important that is. I coordinate a lot of those meetings and negotiations now. But you also have to be a leader in this position. Not everyone is always going to agree. And I see this role as being the quarterback on behalf of the city for our federal interests. So for example, there's been a disagreement for the last decade with the chairman and the mayor about what to do with the transfer of the RFK land. And our colleague who has been made clear, leading these efforts in the congresswoman's office, said there's a disagreement among the city leadership and therefore I won't support the transfer. Now, that's not the type of leader I want to be in this role. The transfer of 180 acres of land that was sitting dilapidated to be transferred, that is now the largest private investment that our city has ever received in our history, going to create thousands and thousands of jobs and 6,000 units of housing and bring the commanders home, is a great thing for the district. So I will always work to collaborate with our mayor, with our council, with the Attorney General's office, and I will know when it's time to lead and do what's best for the city.
Next up is Greg Yasko. Better?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I think everyone's going to have it by the end of the night. That's great. Again, I think a lot of interesting things have been said. What I think is important to recognize is that this is a federal position. So it is not an adjunct of the mayor's office. It's not an adjunct of the city council. The city council, the mayor, they have very different responsibilities. And it's very important that we continue to reinforce those different responsibilities. So the role of the delegate is really to serve in a federal position. That means not only working with the district on issues that are important to the district, such as appropriations funding in areas that are important and priorities for the mayor and the city council. But as others have said, there will not always be agreement. So part of the job of the delegate is to be able to make decisions independently, working through my own channels in the community for what I think is important for the district from a federal perspective. But that also means being engaged on national issues like the war in Iran, like what we're doing right now there, and being a vocal leader, for instance, in talking about impeachment, because quite frankly, I think impeachment is crucial right now for President Trump. He's acting lawlessly. So there is certainly a part of this job that is working with the council and the mayor, but there's so much more to it. And it's something that I'm ready to really work on from day one, given the work that I've done both at a national and international level to really elevate the stature of this position even more as a national leader, as a national figure here in the nation's capital. Thank you.
The final question for the candidates tonight is the following. As a district's congressional delegate, could you describe how you would approach constituent services and outreach to the residents of the District of Columbia? The first candidate to address that would be Mr. Trent Holbrook.
Thank you for that important question. So constituent services has been at the core of so much of what I've done, working with Congresswoman Norton for the past 8 years. As probably so many of you know, there are 2 offices that a member of Congress has. They have the Hill office and they have a constituent service office. And our constituent service office is so critically important in large part because we have so many federal employees here in DC and they need federal services, especially now more than ever. And on the flip side, I've also worked on many constituent service issues myself on the Hill office, for example, working to make sure that people who violate the DC code and are in the Federal Bureau of Prisons are at facilities that are safe, are at facilities that are close to DC, and those types of things. I would also have to point out too, that I also worked in the RFK land transfer deal, working in Congress, both with Democrats and also with Republicans, as opposed to working just in the council where you're working with just Democrats. So that includes working with, for example, Chairman Comer's office, the Republican chair of the Oversight Committee. And I would just have to say too, I was very surprised to hear that one of my colleagues mentioned that Congressman Norton has missed votes in the committee of the whole, because the last time I checked, the Congresswoman had one of the best voting records in Congress. She never misses votes. So I was surprised to hear that. And I was advising the Congresswoman even on committee of the whole votes all the way until I left my position to run for this position back in January. Thank you.
The next candidate for this question, Mr. Greg Yatsko.
But as we've talked about a lot tonight, there are limitations to what the delegate can do. But there is not a lot of limitations on what they can do for constituent services. That is still a vital function for this office. So I've had a tremendous amount of experience through all of my positions in government, dealing with community members, proactively doing outreach. I'll give you an example. When many years ago, when I was the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I was visiting a nuclear power plant in California that had had a very significant accident. So one of the things that I always did when I visited nuclear power plants was I reached out to community members to set up meetings. Typically, the chair of the NRC would meet with the power plant owners, would meet perhaps with local elected officials. But I made an effort in communities I had never been to before to make sure to find those groups, those people who lived in those communities, so that I could hear what their concerns are and better understand how to do my job. Because that's really what doing this job is about. It's about listening to members of the community and acting on what you hear and what you understand. Too often in government, we go out and we listen, but what people really need is they need something to be acted on. And so it's important to identify what those issues are that you can make progress on. And that requires a lot of outreach, and it's got to be proactive coming from the delegate in this case. And that's something that I will do. And I have a long history of doing that in all of my positions in government. Thank you.
The next candidate to address this question, Mr. Kelly Michael Williams.
That's what I do now. I mean, it's what the ANC commissioner is. We're a constituent services liaison. We're the liaison from the community to the council. I served in that role on the city council. I've served in that role when I was in the state legislature, although I was legislative and political analyst consultant. I also had to do constituent services. So being able to establish a community liaison in each ward is what I want to do. I want to make sure that I have someone in each ward, preferably more than one person, probably 4 or 5, and especially with the ANC commissions, being able to identify and tap someone as a de facto staff person to be able to be my eyes and ears in the community so that I can always stay connected and make sure that I'm able to meet with them at least quarterly and be able to get information and get feedback from them about what their issues are, what their concerns are, and having that de facto staff person out there being able to feed information not only from my constituent services people in my office back to the community, but from the community back to us, so that there is a continual loop of information flowing back and forth. As constituent services director for the council and as an ANC commissioner, that's what we do. We sit there and we make sure that we're addressing your issues and your needs, because you're always checking with your ANC commissioner about a housing, a zoning, or trash cans, or whatever it is that you have an issue with, snow removal. You come to us and we try to solve that problem. So that's what I'll continue to do.
And Ms. Kenny Sons.
I think constituent services is especially important when, as I said, the residents of DC only have 16 people who represent them citywide. So, and most important to me, one of the first things I want to do is open a constituent services office in Ward 7 and 8. Trent, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Eleanor Holmes Norton used to have an office there and does not anymore. I think that the only constituent services office is like near the White House, which is not super valuable for most of the 700,000 people who live in the city. I would restore an office in Ward 7 and 8. I would make sure that everyone in every neighborhood and every ward knows that they have a delegate in Congress, that they have someone who can help them access the resources of the federal government, that they have an advocate who can help them if they're having a problem with anything related to the federal government. It's one of the parts of the job I look forward to most. It's one of the great pleasures of being a public servant, is engaging with people regularly, listening to their problems really intently, really and creatively and diligently searching out the solutions. So I look forward to it, and I'm delighted to expand the delegate's role in services across the community.
Thank you all for that. Appreciate it. Oh, sorry. Hold it. Well, sorry.
I couldn't miss this one, because anyone who's been an elected official or has worked in an office knows that constituent services is the most important piece of any public service role, and it is our direct outreach to the residents that we serve and that we have the privilege of serving. And it's in my bones, it's in my blood. I'm a hospitality person. I studied hospitality in school. I've worked at hotels and restaurants. I managed a frozen yogurt shop. And in my work on the DC Council, I am extremely proud of our constituent services team. I think all the constituent services staff in the council are excellent, but I feel very confident saying we have the best constituent services in the city. And how I know that is because we do constituent services for residents of all 8 wards. And on all committee topics that generally would go to other ward members or committees. I'm the Ward 2 council member, but we have more constituent services requests than any other office in the city. We've compared with other offices, and that's because it is embedded in the ethos of our office that we are in service first. And as I say to my team all the time, it may be someone's only interaction with the government when they call and need help. And so we have to deliver that with hospitality and with service. And so it's very, very important for this role because of all the federal needs that this office has. And I'm eager to continue the reputation that we've set in the council in delivering those constituent services in Congress.
Wow, thank you. So we have a few more things we want to do this evening. We need to close the doors at 9. We'd like to have a half hour for an opportunity for the audience to meet the candidates. And we do have a few questions from the audience. I think you saw them sending index cards around. I'd like to read one that has not been answered by the candidates before. The question is and this is from the floor. I'm concerned about the growing number of federal agencies and buildings being moved out of the city. Do you share that concern? And if so, what can be done to reverse the trend? I'd like to start with Trent Holbrook.
Thank you for that question. And it's such a critically important one. And frankly, it's one that we've been dealing with for several years now, including during the first Trump administration. Federal agencies should not be moved out of DC. There is a reason that they are in DC. You know the reasons. There's no reason to go through all of them, but it's also critically important. One of the main reasons too is because you need to hold federal agencies accountable to Congress, and Congress is in DC. It works much easier if they're here. We also saw in the first Trump administration that they moved part of the Department of Agriculture, I think it was, to Colorado. And almost immediately, the agency had to come back because they realized it doesn't work that way. There's some rhetoric that sounds good, like maybe we're going to go off and be close to who we regulate, but that's not how the government works. We know that, the federal government knows that, and so I hope that we move beyond those ridiculous arguments to do that. And I would consistently fight, just as I have with Congressman Norton, to make sure that agencies do not move out of the National Capital Region. Thank you.
Next up is Greg Yasko.
Yeah, so this is an extremely important issue, I think, for the district. The federal workforce that is here is both as residents are vital for the district, as well as workers who come into the district to work in the federal government. So there's both of those people. Not all of those people obviously live here and can vote for all of us, but nonetheless, those are people who also they contribute to the economic vibrancy of this city. And bringing those people back into the district is extremely important, not only protecting them from or preventing them from leaving, but also bringing them back. And there's certainly a balance because the workforce currently enjoys or has enjoyed in the past a degree of work from home that I think needs to be balanced with the needs of having people working here in the district. And I can say, as having somebody who ran a federal agency that was in Rockville, one of the first comments I made, being a district resident when I got to that agency, was the comment on I wish it was better that we were actually downtown in DC. We had a lot of staff who were based in Virginia and didn't want to do the commute, but as I did the job, I began to realize that it was vitally important when we dealt with major national incidents and I had to go to the White House. It took me 45 minutes to get from there to the White House. So it is important in particular to have senior leaders and key elements of the government here in DC so they can go to the Hill, they can work together with all the elements of the federal government and be a part of that family that does such vital service for the American people. Thank you.
Same question, Brooke Pinto.
So it is a wrong and bad strategy for the federal government to move federal agencies out of DC. It is harmful for our jobs, it's harmful for the economy, and it's harmful for the federal government. And we should state some of those reasons. It is important for the federal government to be in the nation's capital, ensuring that they're collaborating, ensuring that the policymakers who are passing laws are working with those who are implementing and writing those regulations, ensuring that people and stakeholders from the entire country can come to one place to meet with their federal government and meet at the People's House. And so it is something that I will fight against. I'd say two additional things. One, to the agencies that have already moved, we have to act quickly so that we don't have vacant buildings sitting in downtown, not just taking up space, but disallowing our economy from recovering. We have commercial property tax vacancies in many buildings downtown that are a lagging indicator of several years. And it is the key issue that is blowing a hole in our budget. The DOGE cuts impacting 40,000 jobs. And the vacancy issues not being addressed on our tax rolls. And so when we talk about the very important operational funding needs we have in our city for our schools and our parks and our healthcare and our safety, we can't do it without a strong tax base. And that's why it's so important to transfer those buildings. The last thing I'll say is we have to understand the psychology of this president. He likes people coming to visit him. And that's part of why he realized that it doesn't make sense to have all of these agencies move. I'm getting my please stop sign, so I will stop. But thank you.
Thank you much. Kelly Michael Williams.
Federal buildings.
federal buildings, federal jobs.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, initially and everything, agreeing with my colleagues. 40,000 workers, getting rid of the jobs. The buildings can't be vacant. I agree with that as well. We have to do something with transferring those. I think prayerfully when Democratic Congress, Democratic House, and the Democratic President come in, maybe we will actually rehire many of those federal workers. If we can't do that beforehand with legislation and being able to get rid of that executive order. I think at the same time, cynically, admittedly, that if that's what they're going to do, then that gets rid of the federal enclave issue that we have to have. And then we can go ahead and get statehood and move something by that way, you know? Think outside the box and let's try to do something different. But ideally, I think we need to make sure that we get our federal workers back, get them to work. And if we can't do that, we need to be able to retrain and be able to offer opportunities for them, either through small business development, creating them opportunities with the experience that they've had in the federal government, turn them into entrepreneurs and be able to come back and contract with the federal government since they always want to do privatization. Let our federal workers that have been laid off and removed from their positions come back and charge the federal government for that layoff and get their money and get paid. That's what I want for them.
Last up is Kenny Selesny. Now, Kenny, before you leave the podium, please wrap up. So we're going to give you a little bit of extra time to wrap you up and say how you are differentiating between yourself and the other candidates.
Great. Okay, first I want to answer the question on the table about the evacuation and exodus of federal agencies. I think it's even worse than my colleagues have articulated. This is not just an economic hit, and it's not just an assault on the core functions of federal government. One of the great triumphs and success stories of DC is the building of the Black middle class through the vehicle of the federal government. And Trump knows it. And when he eviscerates federal agencies and takes them out of DC, it is an express attack on that Black middle class. He is deliberately trying to undermine the growth and the progress that the Black community has made in DC over decades. And because the federal government was an engine of that growth, it's an enemy to him. It's part of why he hates the federal government. So when he takes federal agencies out of here, it's an ideological issue for him. It's a racist attack on our city. And we've got to object, resist, and reverse it as soon as we're able. That's what I've got on that question. So now you want me to do my closing statement? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for. Okay, thank you. Thank you to the organizers, the moderators, and all of you who have come tonight to hear us out. I think the election on June 16th is the most consequential and pivotal that this city will face in a generation. This is a once in a generation opportunity to pick the leadership for the next chapter of DC's history. If these were normal times, we could go with normal local career politicians. We could go with the same people who have been running over and over, whether for this office or for other offices. But these are not normal times. We are under attack by our own president. He has delivered a frontal assault on our economy. He has made healthcare impossible to afford. And the MAGA Republicans regularly mess with our legislation and our budget, and they do it to perform for their own constituents, and they are not concerned about us. I am the only one in this race with both the deep local roots and the national relationships, networks, and track record that it will take to get things done for DC. I am the only one in the race who has worked in all three sectors. And I think you should demand that of your leadership class going forward. Today's problems are so complicated that no one sector is going to solve them, not government, not the private sector, not the nonprofit sector. But the solutions will come from people who can think across those boundaries and who have experience in all of them. I have senior experience in all those sectors, and that's the kind of interdisciplinary and creative thinking we're going to need to solve today's problems. So I would urge you on June 16th to think about the A team across the city that we need to hire, that we need to appoint to lead our city to the next chapter. And it would be my great honor to have your support in that race. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next up is Kelly Michael Williams. I think you did that.
Yeah, I answered that.
So now it's a wrap up.
Okay, thank you. So as I opened up to you, I explained to you that I had every level of government. I was a small business owner. I also run a nonprofit where I'm teaching youth how to build drones so they become air traffic controllers because they only need a high school diploma. So as my colleague said, she's not the only one. She's the only female that has it. I'm the male that has the same experience. But more importantly, I'm sorry, guys. I'm 6'6". I apologize. But more importantly, I'm the only candidate that was in this race in 2024. I didn't run because the media said that our delegate was losing her strength and her vigor. I ran because I was convicted then to do so. My colleagues, unfortunately, got in this race because of the news media or someone told them to. Because if they had that same conviction that they have today, they would have ran in 2024. When we saw what Trump was doing to our city then, they would have ran with the conviction to do so. They didn't do that. So I'm not here for opportunism. I'm here for conviction. I'm here to fight for the values that I did when I took care of my mother for 13 years and left the workforce to do so. When I slept in the back of my car with my 3-year-old to make sure that he had something that he can strive for and see the example of what a father would be, even if he had to sleep in the back of his car. If you want someone that's going to fight for you, if you want someone who's a survivor, I'm the person you want. But if you want the status quo, if you want someone who is a bureaucrat that's going to sit there and just go through the motions, then vote for any of my colleagues. But if that is you, and you've ever had to take care of your parent or a loved one, or you've ever had to struggle, you want someone who's there, who understands that and who's been there with you. That's me, Kelly Michael Williams. Put me number 1 or put me number 2. I'll take either one.
Brooke Pinto.
Well, again, my name is Brooke Pinto, and I hope to have your support in this election. We hear a lot nowadays this word coalition building. And I think that's where a record becomes really, really important. On the council, I have tackled some of the most complicated, pressing challenges facing our city. And when I propose solutions, many times people at first said, this will never work, this will never pass, this will never have support. We put together the largest piece of legislation in our city's history called Secure DC that drove down violent crime by over 50%. We put together the largest conversion package to revitalize downtown after the pandemic, to convert vacant office buildings to housing, affordable housing, retail, green space that DC is now leading the country in. I put together proposals to invest in our literacy infrastructure. DC is now went from the second lowest literacy jurisdiction in the country to the highest improving jurisdiction in the country. So I know this city, I love this city, And I also know people across this country, and we are going to have to build coalitions with people outside of DC to have wins for DC. That's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing all year, which is why I was motivated to run for this seat, because we need someone new who can both play defense for the attacks on the city and play offense so that we can get the wins that we deserve. I'm eager to do this work. I am ready to do this work. I hope to have your support. And I will also say, I loved hearing a lot of my colleagues' answers tonight to a lot of the questions. And this is a ranked choice voting election. So as a reminder, if you like several of us, you can rank us in order of your preference. And that's an amazing expansion of voting rights that I fought for and worked on the DC Council. And so I hope you all exercise that right in this election on June 16th.
Thank you. Greg Yasko.
Again, my name is Greg Yatzko, and I am running for the DC delegate to Congress. And the reason I'm running is very simple. I watched as Trump assaulted the federal workforce. I watched as Trump led an assault on immigrants in this country. I ran a federal agency. I depended on 4,000 federal workers to help me do my job, to help the American people stay safe when it came to nuclear power plants. When I saw the assaults on immigrants from ICE and other federal agencies, I thought about my father, who passed away about 7 years ago, but he was an immigrant to this country, an immigrant from Venezuela. And I thought, if he were still alive, would he be under threat of deportation, of attacks and assaults from ICE agents or other people in the federal government? And I thought, that is not right, and that is not okay. That is our own government that should be here to protect us. And I believe in everything that I've ever done in government, that government should protect those in this country who need the most. And that has been the value that has guided everything that I have ever done in government, to try and help people to use the tools of the federal workforce, of all the resources that we have to make America a better country. So this race, we're all Democrats running in a Democratic Party, or running in a Democratic primary in a Democratic city. There's not a lot of issues perhaps where we're different. What it really comes down to is who has the leadership ability to communicate, to reach out, to build coalitions, to make DC a state at the end of the day. And I think I'm the best person to do that. So I urge you to vote for me on June 16th in the primary, and vote for me first. And then if not, vote for me second. Thanks.
And our final speaker, Trent Holbrook.
Thank you again so much for hosting and attending this important forum. As I mentioned at the outset, I worked side by side with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton for the past 8 years. I worked to oversee the greatest progress in the march toward DC statehood that we have ever seen. I worked with Congresswoman Norton to protect our federal employees, fighting their illegal firings, and working on legislation to require that they be hired back with back pay and with no loss in their service. I fought for pay raises for federal employees and to improve their retirement benefits. I have served as an employee in the executive branch of government myself. I also successfully led the effort to increase DC TAG awards, which help pay and offset the cost of college tuition by 50%. The first increase since the program was created in 1999. So let's be honest. The DC delegate position is not a DC council job. With the DC council, you're advocating to like-minded Democrats. With the delegate position, as I know all too well, this is about protecting our basic rights from Republicans and even some moderate Democrats. Frankly, this job isn't even like any other member of Congress. The delegate is a primary person on the front lines of every single battle, defending DC and fighting for our equality. I am the one person in this race with the right experience to start delivering for DC on day one, because I've done it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. This has been a great discussion. We've learned a lot tonight. We have a few thank yous to make. My colleague Eddie will take care of that.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you especially for the candidates, giving their time to express their positions on different issues, which are important to all of us. We'd also like to thank everybody in the audience who took the time to come. Also our timekeeper, who donated his time also here to help out, the Shepherd Park Citizen Association, Chevy Chase Citizen Association, and also St. John's College High School here for allowing us to have this forum here, and who also educates my two kids. Thank you, everybody.